Hi there, and thank you for joining me for today's live reading of Bad Enough by Nicole Craig, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, April 6th, Sylvan. Ping, you've got mail. After clicking into her email and scanning its new contents, she worried the left side of her bottom lip and hissed when she felt herself draw blood. Go away. Hastily, she clicked the box in front of the new unwanted email, clicked the delete button, and then proceeded back to her manuscript. Fingers poised over her keyboard, she stared at the white page. Her brain waited for words to flow from its dark, creative corners. A full minute passed, and nothing happened. Her fingers didn't even twitch. Her eyes narrowed to pour every ounce of her energy into staring down the cursor's mocking wink. Aw, are you stuck? No, I am not stuck. Distracted perhaps? By anything in particular? Or should I say anyone? I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think you know exactly who I'm talking about. Please, what would be the point of being distracted by him? It's not like he cares. See, you knew who I meant. And distractions don't have a point. That's why they're called distractions. They are, by definition, pointless. Besides, he must care at least a little. The two of you texted for hours 2 nights ago. Not his previous MO, which was to text you, you replied, and a couple of hours would go by before he responded again. Maybe you should stop bothering me. You're the one distracting me right now. Don't blame this on me. Blame it on tall, dark, and broody. You don't know that he's any of those things. You've never seen him. Oh, but I can imagine him that way. And if I can, that means you can, because we're the same person. So be a good girl and admit he's distracting you. She huffed in indignation. I will admit no such thing. Who do you think you're fooling? Do you even hear yourself talking to yourself? Don't tell me you're not distracted. Oh, for sitting on a cat. Are you even listening to me? Us? Whatever. I told you I'm distracted. I'm just not distracted by him. That's so sweet. You honestly believe that, don't you? Stop lying to yourself. Recognizing the problem is the first step to recovery. I'm ignoring you now. Bye bye. Sylvan swore she heard mocking laughter echoing inside her head. Giving her shoulders a quick shake, she settled her fingers on the ASDFJKL semicolon position on the keyboard once more and returned her eyes to the screen with a new sense of purpose. 3 minutes later, nothing. Not even a string of gibberish. These words aren't going to type themselves, you dumb bunny, so think of something. 47 days isn't much time. A frustrated sigh expelled itself from her mouth with a force strong enough to lift the stray wisps of hair falling loose from the messy pile on top of her head. In 25 previous manuscripts, she had never experienced this. Writing manuscript 1 with no technical understanding of the craft, words poured out of her fingertips so fast even she had been surprised. With manuscript 2, she'd worried that her sophomore effort would prove her greatest fear, that the freshman effort was a fluke, and that she'd never write another novel. But even then, the words had always come, although they weren't necessarily great ones at first. Today, not a floofing thing. Her finger sat atop the keyboard, her eyes gazed on the page, and Sylvan's brain wandered again. Back to those texts from 2 nights ago when the distractor in question told her some hilarious stories about his coworker, particularly one where he suffered a bite to the butt by a coral snake. She'd been smiling like a loon through the whole exchange, totally acting like a teenager texting with her first crush, but she was past caring. Come to think of it, their texting sessions had gotten longer and longer of late. Maybe he was a little intrigued. Then again, he'd been stuck on his recent business trip coming up on 50 days, so he was probably climbing the walls with boredom and texting her to pass the time. Ding dong! Sylvan's brow furrowed. Who the heck is messaging me at this hour of the night? She clicked over onto her social media page to see that, sure enough, someone had messaged her on her author page. Before thinking it through, she clicked on the notification. Thinking things through had never been her strong suit. She really needed to work on that. Unknown. Hello, Red. Miss me? Unknown. I told you that you'd never escape me. Unknown. I have to say, you made me work to find you. Unknown. And you've been ignoring my emails. Can't have that. Unknown. See you soon. All the blood rushed from the upper portion of Sylvan's body as the messages began appearing on her screen. when she violently shoved her keyboard, as if that would make the message writer be further away from her. It caught the edge of her teacup, sending the contents spilling. The scalding liquid splashed her hand with stinging bites, and it ran in all directions on her desk, ruining her notes in the notebook she'd been referencing. She whimpered, "Lock it down. He can't see you. He's not here. He can't hurt you. He may have found you on the computer, but that doesn't mean he knows where you are. You hid well." Shaking with real fear, Sylvan reached out to hard shut down the computer. Clutching her burnt hand and ignoring the spreading spilled tea, she sprung from her desk chair, dove into her bed, and pulled the bedspread up over her head, just like she used to when she was little and scared. A part of her prayed for the magic that children believed in, that if every part of you was under the covers, the monsters couldn't touch you. Unfortunately, she knew from experience that some monsters were far more powerful than cover magic. It was hours of tears later when she finally fell into a fitful sleep. But even then, she dreamt of shadowy figures who ripped and tore covers to shreds, then covered her with their stinking breath, salivating mouths, and grotesque bodies, and there was no Prince Charming in the background to fight them off. Chapter 2, April 10th, TB. Multicolored lights swung and spun chaotically to shine down on the dance floor. Fog machines flooded the floor with cold mist, enveloping the dancers packed in the pool, as it was called, because of its entrances being 5 steps down from the main floor. The club was hot, too hot for his liking. Worst of all, his organs felt like they were being shocked with electricity, and his blood seemed to pulse with the synthetic bass line of classic Depeche Mode. The club speakers are working overtime tonight. Too loud. Internally, he sighed. Even to him, his inner voice sounded old. He hadn't wanted to come to the library tonight, but he was twitchy, pissed off. Well, pissed off was a constant state for him, so this qualified as more pissed off than usual. Coming to the club should have helped ease the twitchiness, but as soon as he arrived, he remembered it hadn't helped the last few times he'd come here before going overseas. Same shit, different day. What's the point? He blamed part of his current negativity on his team leader, Waters, for being the ultimate dumbass. The man was acting completely out of character, leaving his woman while she was possibly still vulnerable to danger, simply on the orders of their boss. The man was going to pay for his mistake in more ways than one. I love that man like a brother, but sometimes. Then there was the long-standing fuckery of one of his teammates, Nemo, who irritated him simply by breathing. They'd only been back from Roatan for a few hours, and he'd already been the victim of 2 confetti cannons, an air horn, and a skeleton popping out of a closet at him. TB wished that the snake that idiot had recently battled with would have bitten him on the dick instead of on the ass. You know you need to stand off to the side when opening any door in the office, dumbass. Internally, he sighed. Putting on his club persona, Lobo, was usually an easy task. He spent most of his adult life using code names, nicknames, and aliases in his undercover work in the Israeli military, and then again in his self-contractor role over the dark web. Going to work for Tribe 5 years ago had added another name to the resume. Being someone else was nothing new, but lately it was exhausting and a little like he no longer knew who he was. Perhaps the worst part of why he was in a crap mood right now was his current conversation partner. Tilly, the club name for internet influencer Matilda Mall, a young 20-something from the valley, had sashayed over to him at the club and tried to flirt with him. She was a regular at the club and overall a sweet thing when she wasn't being a brat, but TB didn't like sweet things. Flame is a sweet thing. You like her. Shut up, goody two-shoes, or I'll throat punch you right out of my head. I'm frustrated. I need something to work my frustration out on. Tilly would be perfect in brat mode. The trouble was, all he wanted was to swat her away like an annoying mosquito. Sighing internally, he realized he should have skipped the club and stayed home to chat with Flame. That's what he had wanted to do, but he chickened out like a total pussy and forced himself to come here. Flame was too sweet, too nice for the likes of someone like him. She deserved romance and a man who would come home every night to make love to her, not a jaded fuck like him. His hands were far too bloody to even think of being in the same room as her. And yet, it was what he desperately wanted. Through their online chats, he discovered she was harboring such naughtiness in her head. All he wanted to do was muss her up. It didn't even matter that he had no clue what she'd look like. He'd honestly fallen in love over a computer chat. Him. The love bug had bitten Mr. Asshole, and he was so infected, his brain kept trying to come up with scenarios where he deserved his little flame in his life every day. But every scenario he came up with was a bust. And when his team leader threw in the towel on the best thing that ever happened to him, TB knew an omen when he saw one. That was the only clue he needed to remind him that relationships were not for men like them. Technically, relationships were forbidden. One disastrous project involving Waters' sister, Sarah, brought that on. For a brief while, however, the team had looked on at the off-the-wall chemistry of Waters and the Spitfire film director, Kubrick, and had been rooting for them. They'd all been believers for a short while, and then, poof, it all went up in smoke. Internally, he snorted at the direction his thoughts were running. He was such a hypocrite. Not too long ago, he'd been telling his team leader to seize the opportunity instead of turning his back on the possibilities with a woman he'd fallen for. For a brief while, it looked like he'd done it. Now the poor bastard was sulking in his office at Tribe, his tail between his legs, and TB was ignoring the very advice he'd given his team leader. Well, my situation isn't the same. Really? Exactly how is it different? He hated when the voices in his head argued with one another. He always felt like he was stuck in the middle of some weird menage a trois. It was creepy. I'm not a nice guy, and Waters is. Nice? You remember the project in Somalia, right? He's the one who taught you that trick with the handsaw. And I hope I never have to use it. That even gave me nightmares. Raising his glass to his mouth, TB took a generous swallow of his water. He never drank while at the club. If he took part in the club's upper level activities, nothing should interfere with those experiences. But right now, Tilly's never ending chatter was making him wish for a heavy dose of scotch and a sharp pencil to stab through his eardrum to his brain and end the misery. I desperately wanted to dump my energy drink on his antique desk, since he was being such a total prick, you know? Apparently, I didn't set my phone alarm last night, or else I slept through it. I mean, I was up really late helping my friend through her latest man disaster, but what else was I supposed to do? Girl code says you don't let the bestie down, no matter if you have to go to work the next morning or not. So what if I was 15 minutes late? Then the boss was mad because I allegedly misplaced some files he needed for a client today. I found them eventually. He spends the first 5 or 10 minutes shooting the shit with them about their golfing or their fishing or whatever stupid old man hobby they have anyway. The client wouldn't even have known it had been missing. And to top it all off, he claimed I double booked his lunch appointment today with his mother's birthday lunch date. If he let me merge his personal calendar and his business calendar in the frickin' computer app, I wouldn't have to remember to check both of them before scheduling anything. Who cares if the rest of the staff can see his personal schedule? We're all too damn busy to be poking around in his private life. Besides, even if I did all those things, everyone has bad days, right? TB didn't bother to reply. He knew she really wasn't expecting an answer, and her dialogue would continue. You look a bit like you've had a bad day yourself. I like the broody look myself, so I don't mind. Goes with all the black clothing, the leather jacket, and your dark hair. Totally smoking. And your eyelashes. I know a lot of women who would kill for eyelashes like yours. So thick and dark. I bet you'd be really hot if you smiled more. He barely refrained from rolling his eyes. I mean, not that you're not really hot now. You totally are, she corrected. I know you're really built, and I bet you spend a lot of time at the gym. That's hot too. You don't see a lot of guys your age who take such great care of their appearance. I like that. Normally, I wouldn't be interested in someone so much older than me, but you're different. Guys my age? I'm 37, not 77. So, are you? He took another swallow from his glass, finished his water, and set the empty glass on the bar. He flicked a finger at Riley, his favorite bartender, signaling he needed a refill. Without looking at Tilly, he asked, Am I what? Having a bad day. He nodded at Riley as she pushed his refilled glass toward him. No. Oh, wow. I mean, like I said, you've totally got that broody alpha thing going, but you're looking even more grouchy than usual. Do you want to dance? Might cheer you up. I'm a really good dancer. No. Oh, okay. Do you want to go upstairs? She asked nervously. Maybe I could make your day better if we did a scene. TB stood straight and grabbed his glass from the bar top. I thought you were exclusive with Cosmos. He slammed the water in his glass, set the empty glass on the bar, and slid it toward a smirking Riley who had overheard Tilly's offer. She looked properly embarrassed at his rebuke. I'm sorry, Master Lobo. I thought maybe, she shrugged. Everyone's been talking about you, how you haven't been involved in a scene in a while. The subs talk about how they really enjoyed partnering with you. I just was hoping I might get to see for myself, especially since you haven't been doing scenes with anyone. I figured that meant you were available, she sighed. Besides, I think Cosmos is tiring of me. Tiring of the chatter, probably. Go on, Tilly. Yes, Master Lobo. Picking up her drink, she turned and began walking over to her friends at their high table along the pool. On the way there, she began circumventing the bodies coming off the dance floor. Someone bumped into her hard, spilling her drink on her dress and almost knocking her to the floor. The person helped Tilly right herself, and then the river of people from the dance floor was rushing upon and around them, dividing into two paths to avoid the obstacle, much like salmon swimming upstream to spawn. He tried to follow them, making sure she was okay, but he lost them in the crowd. TB turned to face the bar as he shook his head and sighed in frustration. You can't blame her, Lobo, but you could have been a little nicer about the put down. Are you telling me how to handle my business, Rye? Yes. I should put you over my knee. I'm no one's sub to punish, just working here to fund my editing costs. BDSM is fun to read, but not really my thing in real life. Everyone's got their kink, Rye. TB reached for his wallet and pulled out a 20. Even you. Placing the bill on the bar, he winked at her.